Michael Mackenzie is our next presenter, and he's presenting on yoga and its use in treating cancer. Michael is currently working towards his PhD in Kinesiology at the University of Calgary with Dr. Kulis-Reed, and his proposed research explores the relationships between yoga practice, affect and attention regulation, health outcomes, and program adherence in cancer survivors. He's also received extensive training as a yoga teacher and in a mindfulness-based therapies. And Michael has worked in the field of mental health and rehabilitation since 1998 and is the co-author of several publications in the area of mindfulness, yoga, and cancer. So if everyone give Michael a warm round of applause.
Thanks very, very much. So yeah, my goal tonight is to just give you a real intro to yoga specifically for people that have had a cancer experience, let you know a little bit about the mechanisms that we're exploring right now, and then just tell you very briefly about the program that we're running here in town. And if there's some questions afterwards, I'd be happy to address those. So I'm going to try and move. Oh. How are we doing? Da-da-da, da-da-da. Nice. All right. Works. So basically, what we know is that in terms of yoga and cancer, yoga is becoming one of the most utilized. Used to be called complementary therapies, and now we're tending to use the term integrative therapies, in that we're seeing these as integral components of cancer care. That it's wonderful that we have the surgeries and on all the other treatments, but many people are left afterwards saying, you know, what do we do after we've had this experience? And yoga being something that people can continue to do afterwards for their own health and for the rest of their lives. So here's an example of our yoga feasibility studies at the University of Calgary. You can see all of our participants are willing. Sorry, thanks. Great. So what do we know so far? There's been about 25 studies so far on yoga specifically for people that have had a cancer experience. There was a review study that looked at the 10 best quality ones. And what we found for people, and I'm sure many of you can relate to it, is that it really does impact on people's activities of daily living and really base sort of psychological things like sleep measures, our overall quality of life, our ability to do the things that we like to do in the day, our stress, our mood, and our energy levels. So when we're sitting and talking to people that have participated in our program, you know, they enjoy the flexibility, they enjoy the added strength, they enjoy the relaxation that they experience during the intervention. But when we ask them about, well, you know, what else do you think you're getting out of it? A lot of the time people will say, well, you know, I think I'm sleeping a little bit better, or I'm not as tired, or maybe I'm doing some of the things that I wasn't doing before. So it's a nice way to sort of retune the nervous system after going through a cancer experience. So a lot of what has been looked at, of course, with in a cancer population is, you know, we've seen a number of studies for breast, but the mechanisms we're finding are going to be the same regardless of what your diagnosis is. Again, a recent randomly controlled trial, we saw all these great psychosocial benefits. Second larger study done in India. India is a great place to do research because you literally get like 300 people show up and do your study. It's fantastic. No recruitment problems. Same sort of benefits, increased cognitive function as well, and an increased positive effect. So affect we define as it's kind of the precursor to emotion. It's that gut feeling you have of things being good or being bad. And an emotion is kind of when your brain shows up and it explains why it's good or bad. So a lot of the research that I'm doing right now is looking more at their affective experience versus sort of strict emotion. Okay, and then this overall quality of life that people tend to report higher quality of life after an intervention. Anxiety goes down, and the nice thing for us is people as these measures improve, they tend to tell us that they liked us, which we always enjoy, and that they enjoyed the intervention, which, as Loren was talking about, usually means that they're more likely to continue on with us. And the nice thing about our program is we've been running it since 2002, I believe, and there's people that have been with us almost that whole time. So people have continued to come to our program again and again. Our initial vision was to do a 7-week program. You'd do the 7 weeks, and then maybe you'd go take a class in your community. But a lot of people have chosen to stick with our program and have been there for that long period of time. So we know there's benefits, but the question for researchers, because we think too much, is always, why is that the case? So some of the research that we're doing now is looking at what some of these potential mechanisms of action might be. And I should just say that our background from our lab, we do work a lot with wonderful exercise physiologists, but we're sort of primarily an exercise psychology lab, our origin. So a lot of our questions are more around how people are thinking and feeling and behaving, in addition to just sort of a strict physiological definition. So one of the culprits that we're finding is regulation in the autonomic nervous system, specifically the parasympathetic nervous system. So many of us have heard of flight or fight, or fight or flight, and that's the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system has been given the helpful sort of memory-aiding device of rest and digest as your parasympathetic nervous system. And what we're finding is that with yoga, in addition to all these health benefits, in terms of people reporting things like decreased fatigue, improved mood, is that when we do physiological measures, what we find is that their autonomic nervous system is actually improving, which is one of the things that, interestingly, when we look at cancer patients across the board, regardless of diagnosis, more and more emerging evidence shows that the autonomic nervous system takes a hit. That people are more likely to move into sort of more of a sympathetic predominant state. Okay. So one of the ways that we think that this is happening in the body is through control of respiration. And that this control of respiration and improved oxygen consumption increases this parasympathetic component of the nervous system, as well as autonomic nervous system tone. And what that basically is our ability to readjust in our day based on what's happening to us. So a stressful event, how quickly do we recover? That would be a measure of autonomic nervous system tone. And what we find is that as we can recalibrate that, people are responding better to stressors throughout their day. And that's not necessarily just, I'm having a bad day. That can even be, I was walking to the bus stop and I walked a little too fast, and the body will recalibrate quicker. Whereas many people that have had a cancer experience will note that if they're unduly stressed, be it physically or psychologically, that effect lingers much longer than before they had the diagnosis. Okay. The other thing that we're finding is that these postures in and of themselves have effects on the body. When we do sort of more vigorous postures with people, they have similar effects to regular exercise that we've been discussing tonight. But these relaxation postures as well have this additional parasympathetic effect. And what we're starting to wonder about now in terms of my research is how we sequence this activity between high activity and low activity in a yoga session is actually calibrating the nervous system. The other one that comes up a lot and that's become sort of a word that's entered the popular culture is this whole notion of mindfulness, which sort of a simple definition is paying attention in the present moment on purpose. And what we're finding is that yoga really facilitates people's ability to pay attention in the present moment on purpose. And what this does for many people is it almost hones that early detection system in the body to pick up on a stressor, deal with it sooner, and get over it quicker. So what we see is with things like yoga, it provides this flowing, relaxed sequence to experience the body in physiological states, and that the more that people practice over time, these states go from being state-like or temporary to trait-like or more permanent. So I've included a model here. I'm not going to go through it all. But these are some of the concepts that we're working with right now in terms of how to map how yoga works within the individual's system. So our future directions right now are really not only to ask, what's being affected, but how is it being effective? And we do this by integrating our yoga interventions with not only psychological outcomes, but physiological outcomes and the integration between the two. So we're looking at this new model of psychophysiology. So that's kind of my intro. In terms of populations that we're working with right now, we have done some work specifically with prostate in the past. By a colleague of mine named Ashley Ross. So that paper should be coming out in the next couple of months. And what we found that was interesting with that is that everybody improved, but what was particularly interesting for us is not only the improvements that we saw in our people that had experienced cancer, but our program's also open to support people. And many of our support people were wives. And what we found that was interesting is that many of our support people, i.e. the wives, were as stressed out as the husbands. And we didn't really expect to see that. That was a bit of an unexpected finding for us, though it makes a lot of sense if you've worked. I think Loren had already made some mention of the brain cancer study that's going on. And now we're currently doing some data analysis as well in terms of our ongoing programs. Again, my research at this point really looks at these bare minimum physiological mechanisms. What's happening in terms of affect, what's happening in terms of how people are attending, and how does this affect health outcomes like stress and mood. So currently we're working with our existing 7-week program. We do a 3 and a 6-month follow-up. We do qualitative interviews where we actually sit down with people and say, we have some ideas about what's actually going on for you, because it's probably important to ask the people that are going through the intervention. And we're doing lab sessions where people come in, we wire them up with a heart rate monitor, and we put them through a full yoga session. We're asking some questions around affect and attention at different points, and we're measuring heart rate recovery, and an interesting measure called heart rate variability, which is actually the beat between the beats in your heart. And for us, that really tells us what's going on with parasympathetic nervous system activity. The more variable that is, the more nuanced that is based on what you're doing, the better. And what we're finding is that sometimes when people come in, if the more lockstep that heart rate variability is, generally the higher their sympathetic nervous system activity. So what we've seen in other studies is that as people complete these programs, the heart rate becomes much more nuanced again. And we can then correlate this to other things like stress indices and things of that nature. So again, our program is available in the community. It's a 7-week program. Again, both survivors and their support persons are more than welcome to attend. And to register is just directly through campus recreation at the University of Calgary. We also have a DVD, so some people prefer to practice in the comfort of their own home. And this is available right now. We're not distributing it, but a company called Fitter First here in town is distributing it, and there's some contact information, and I'm sure that'll be provided to people afterwards. So that's my presentation.